Hello, my name is Gil Penalosa, and this is Cities for Everyone, the webinar, where every other week I invite fascinating people to share their stories, their knowledge, so that all of us can become better advocates on creating cities that are equitable, sustainable, and fun. Originally, I'm from Bogota, Colombia, and I've been living in Toronto, Canada for the last 26 years. And 20 years ago, I created a nonprofit 880 Cities. And I've been fortunate to have worked in over 350 cities. And as a way of giving back, I invite friends to help us understand better cities. Today, I have a fascinating guest, Kristian Villadsen. He's going to be talking about urban life and sustainable behavior. How we walk, what do we consume, where do we live? How can cities help us be more sustainable? I met Kristian when I was strategic advisor to the CEO of Gale Architects for over 10 years. He was amazing, and then he was so good that he was promoted to partner. Now he left Gale, and now he's co-director at BRIQ, also in Copenhagen, Denmark. Kristian, welcome. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and about how can we have urban life and sustainable behavior.
Thank you so much. And Jill, you're quite right. Our conversation really started almost 2 decades ago. I spent the first 2 decades of my career as a director and partner at Gale, worked with cities all over the world, worked with big strategies, as I mentioned, Shanghai, across Europe, North America, and it's been a fantastic journey. But now I'm with BRIQ in Copenhagen. I'm among other things with BRIQ because I wanted to really dive into how we can create invitation for what I like to call sustainable behavior. How can we work with the big challenge that we're all facing in becoming more sustainable? And how can we use cities, urban form, urban design, urban planning to reach those goals? So today I'll tell a little bit about how we work, how sustainable behavior work in my mindset, and give a few examples from Copenhagen of how that might be implemented and what the complexity of all these elements might be. So hopefully that will take us through the next 20, 30 minutes, and hopefully they'll raise some question and a good discussions on the back. I will share my slides now, and in just a second, let's see here. There we go. And let's see here. You should see my screen, full screen now.
Now put it in presentation mode. Yeah, perfect. So I'll stay out of the way, and we are very eager to learn about urban life and sustainable behavior.
Thank you so much. And as said, I am by training an architect and urban planner and urban designer. I worked in the field all over the world for the last couple of decades, had the pleasure to meet great people like Jill and others. Today, I'm still working internationally. I'm sitting today in Germany, but I'm really focusing a lot on how we can work with urban life as a way to deal with sustainability and sustainable behavior. My name is Kristian Villadsen. My title is a co-creative director. It's a bit of a twist and a play, but it's actually because when I first joined BRIQ, I was invited in as a creative director, and we had a long talk, and basically we came to the conclusion the time has passed maybe for creative director, because what the world needs now is co-creation. So the title ended up being co-creative director because I think we need to help each other move in a direction where we are more sustainable, where we provide well-being and health in our cities, where we create green communities, and where we nudge people to make the easy or the right choice, the sustainable choice, the easy choice. Very fast about BRIQ, we work in different scales. So we come out of urban life. We work with urban life as a component or mixture, you can say, of the recreational space, the retail space, the commercial space, if you like, and the cultural space. So we're really bringing back to bringing together the different kind of programs that you have within a city, you can say. We do that in master planning, in urban life strategies, in placemaking, early activation, and so on. Then we have a small unit that actually works with architecture, and we don't do a lot of architecture, but the architecture we do because we want to show that we can do things differently. We want to be able to show that we can build more sustainable, and we want to test new ways of doing it, where we also create environments that actually supports people in cities. Last but not least, we have a component that works with the spatial design of city, really making the ground floor of cities part of the public life and the public spaces, so that the life inside the buildings very much becomes a life of the space between the buildings. For us, it's really always about people. It's about creating communities and a sense of belonging. And then it's really about this invitation for sustainable behavior. I have a passion for the Nolly map, and it's a passion I share with a lot of people around the world, I know. But the Nolly map, for those of you, if there's any that hasn't heard about, was the map drawn by Nolly in 1748 in Rome, where he, for the first time, depicted a city, not by drawing the buildings, but actually about drawing what was public accessible. So streets, parks, temples, religious functions, public functions, city halls, all the buildings that are accessible. The way we look at how a city should be planned, we look at, you can say, a retake on the Nolly map, and really trying to figure out how can we make the ground floor, the spaces, support a good urban life, but of course also sustainable behavior. We have some values that we like to work with, and we are very much community driven. We want to create urban life. We want to create communities that are built around urban life. We want to really celebrate the everyday, local first, and an easy way to live. Today we see this everywhere around the world. We seek towards places that have some authenticity, where we feel that people are belonging, where we feel people are loving their neighborhood. This is something that we can cherish across. More and more, this is what people also travel to experience. We see that, and of course, we see that with people living in communities much more and living out in areas when they travel around the world. But at the end of the day, it's about the people that live there and have their everyday life in a community. We talk, of course, when we plan our cities, about the mental and the physical health. A new study is showing that simple seeing a tree from your window can influence your sense of loneliness. We know stress drops dramatically when you live close to parks. There's a number of surveys that has to do with our health in our cities. And then, of course, sustainability, the people, the planet, and profit. At the end of the day, these things need to balance, otherwise we won't reach the goal. Then we really need to do site-specific. I think this is really important to understand the DNA of places, understand how they are connected to the surroundings, and how local heroes can be part of doing that. And then we want to create experiences. We want to create experiences that invite people to partake and be part of a community. And then to the sustainable behavior part. We know that we are over-consuming from a climate perspective. Denmark is somewhere along the lines. I think we consume, if every Dane or if everyone in the world were consuming like Danes, we would need about 4.5 Earth. This difference, we're not the best, we're not the worst, but there's so much of this that needs to be improved. So we're very much focused on saying, how can we actually look at how we can live more sustainable? I'm very inspired by the donor model. This is just a credit to Kate Rethwood. If you don't know of her, the donor model, I very much encourage you to look into it. Basically, very fast, what it says is on the outside of the donut is our planetary boundaries. This is basically the limitation of our resources. But on the inside of the donut is also a limitation of how little we can take away to still have communities work, society works, social infrastructure work. So it's that balance of working within the donut. And then I'm an architect, and I worked my entire life with urban development. And the truth is, of course, that 40% of our global CO2 emission comes from the built environment. It comes from how we build, it comes from the infrastructure, it comes from heating, it comes from the electricity. So whenever we plan our cities, we really need to think very, very closely about what we build, why we build it, and if it is purposeful for build. And then last but not least, I think a lot is being said, and we'll talk more about it today, is we talk a lot about CO2 per square meters, at least in the built environment, the architectural environment. We talk a lot about how it's important that we reduce CO2 on square meters. And of course it is. But unless we change our behavior, our sustainable behavior, we don't actually change much, because at the end of the day, it's the end users we need to encourage to have a more sustainable life. Now, the footprint at the end is the Danish footprint. And what it tells is that the average Dane has a 13-ton CO2 footprint per year. This is done by Contito, a think tank that is working with sustainability. And it says roughly that 22% of your personal CO2 footprint comes from how you live. And this is really the square meters you consume. 24% come from how you move. This is not just taking a flight on holidays, but this is your everyday commute. And then the other big one is actually what we eat, what we consume in our cities. Right? Not all of this is easy to influence, but a lot of it has to do with how we plan our cities, how we live, if we live in cities or if we don't live in cities. And I'd like to just reflect a little bit about this with sustainable behavior. I've heard for years, and I worked a lot with the idea that mobility would be changing. We would be moving towards something that was more sustainable, more electrifying, something that was maybe even self-driving. This is something I've heard numerous times around the world. I took the photo here. This is talented Thomas Heatherwick's idea of what the future car might look like. It's basically a living room for 4 people that will commute you around the city. You have Volkswagen's offer on the other side of a self-driving taxi. And of course, I know from good friends and former colleagues in the US that self-driving taxis are already on the streets in San Francisco and elsewhere. What is true about the electrification and of course the autonomous driving is that at the end of the day, it takes the same space. Unless we really proper go from electrifying to sharing mobility, and that we actually go toward shared transportation, we're not really gonna make it different, because the space consumed by cars will more or less be the same. The CO2 embedded in the infrastructure for cars will be the same, and probably even higher. Most electric cars weighs 2 to 3 times the weight of traditional cars, and they will have a much higher impact on the infrastructure there. So we need to not look singularity at how we move. We need to actually move towards sharing, towards real green mobility like walking and biking. And we need to consider also the CO2 that's linked to the infrastructure around the automobile. A Danish study just on its way now of Danish PhDs looking into this to new development, and even dense new developments in the heart of Copenhagen, where we're very pedestrian and bike oriented and has relatively low car norms, especially in an international perspective. We still spend almost 20% of the CO2 consumption on the infrastructure, the street, the parking garages. This is where the CO2 from the built environment is also linked to. Not but least, I just wanted to point out Danish Technical University years ago did a study that shows in urban areas somewhere between 90 and 95% of people arrive to green mobility on foot, on bike, and with other modes of green mobility. This is to me really interesting, because every time we see this change towards shared mobility or maybe autonomous driving, what we realize is the end consumer would be someone walking or biking or taking their way into it. So just as with public transport, we need to take good care of pedestrians and bicycles. We need to take good care of the walking environment to actually do changes towards shared mobility, whether it's on demand or even better shared properly, like trains and trams and so forth. And of course, whatever we do with the car, whether it's autonomous driving or not, the parking is the same. This might differ slightly, but I don't imagine that it's that different around the world. The European car is said to be parked 92% of the time. The photo I've shown in here is a study I did way back in my Guild days, where we just did a simple test on how much of the parking in the streets of Berlin were actually long-term parking. I think it was 72% of the parking was sitting day after day in the street, just taking up space. And of course, the street is immensely important. Streets makes up to about 25 to 30%, making it a quarter of our cities. But more importantly, in many places, a quarter of our cities to streets actually makes it up to 60 to 80% of our public space. So the streets are really something we share. It's something we co-finance. It's something that should be a public space. And we really need to consider how we use this space in a valid way. I live in a city that actually did the change. So what's interesting is today 65% commute to bike and work by bike or work and school by bike in Copenhagen. This is amazing numbers. You've probably heard this before. When people are asked why they bike in Copenhagen, they don't say because it's healthy, good for the environment, or even cheap. 2/3 say because it's easy, fast, convenient. What is really interesting to me is this change, of course, didn't happen overnight, and it's been a cultural change that it's very much is part of this invitation for sustainable behavior. It is the easiest way to get around. But the mapping that I put in here that has the gray square in it just shows that still in a super pedestrian-friendly, super bike-friendly city as in Copenhagen, still 50% of the streets are actually road space. So this is not about necessarily kicking out the cars at all price. It's about balancing it and getting the balance right so you make it easy to choose. And just a picture, I don't know if you see it, but there's a green line that is only dedicated to bicycles. What we have in Copenhagen is both for bikes and buses. You get a 6-second head start. And of course, it has the great and very important advantages that we have less accidents of right-turning cars hitting bicycles. But more importantly, it has that psychological effect that when you're on a bicycle, when you're sitting in public transport, you actually go before the cars and are ahead of them in traffic, giving you the advantages of and sort of the opportunity to feel a pressured and valued part of the city. Sustainable behavior is, of course, about belonging. It's a number of things. We see a lot of focus going into climate adaptation this year. We have storm floods coming in. We had rising seawater. We know we need to do critical investment in these infrastructure. What is happening when it's done best is that these investments become something more than just a technical infrastructure. This is an example from Copenhagen, where what you're looking at here looks like a playground, and it is. It looks like a soccer field for kids, and it is. It's also a flood water basin that can be flooded, and don't worry, the kids are not at risk. It will go nice and slow, but it's more to say that these adaptations that we do in our cities to do climate adaptation should also encourage more greenery, more playfulness, and a sense of quality for people. We do need social spaces. The statistic on the right just show that in Bavaria, where my accidentally is sitting today, or coincidentally is sitting today, I would rather say, the sense of loneliness is going up. This is statistics we have from all over the world. So this is happening in China, this is happening all over Europe, it's happening in North America. We are living more and more alone. We're living in different phases of our life. And there's a growing need for us to have spaces where we actually feel we belong. Realdania is a Danish foundation that lives and work philanthropically with life quality and the built environment. And it just did a huge survey across Denmark, the biggest ever done into life quality. And what was very humbling and also breathtaking was the fact that actually the most important thing for people in terms of having a sense of life quality in the everyday was that they in their neighborhoods were recognized and could say hi to people. They didn't even have to know the people. They just need to know that that was the guy that had the kiosk on the corner, or that was the guy that came with a post, or that was the guy that were bringing groceries in. But the ability to say hi and recognize faces in your community was the number one element that actually gave life quality to people. We need to rethink, this is just with climate adaptation, we need to rethink how our public investment actually can do more, maybe encourage play. This is just a photo in Copenhagen. Copenhagen have over the last decade, both in their new built schools and in their existing schools, opened up the playgrounds to the public. So basically the playgrounds of the school are now open and spilled over into the street, as you see here. So during the day, The kids in the school can use the playgrounds, but during the night it becomes a community thing where the community are free to use the schools. Of course, it's also being part of a wealthy society where you can say these are public investments, and of course they should benefit the communities after hours, so to speak. We also need urban life that's social and recreational and commercial. And we know that it is important these days. City centers around the world are challenged. Retail is fading. A lot of stuff is bought online today. But what we also know is that people are really interested to go and have experiences. We need to rethink our commercial spaces so they become destinations, experience spaces, that they actually become spaces that we feel we belong in, and that we want to spend time. That's when we're also willing to spend money. And it's not about access to car. The study just referenced on the side just shows that in Copenhagen, at least, the value of having bike parking is far better for the retail units than actually having car parking. But that's, of course, a Copenhagen story. The difficult with sustainable behavior is what we eat. It's really hard to do changes into other people's food consumption, but just a little encouragement. Concito mentioned before that did the study of the Danish footprint has also said that just taking 75% of your beef consumption in a Danish household will actually take 1 ton of CO2 per person per year. And it's not going vegetarian, it's simply replacing it by other meat foods. Now, these data might differ slightly around the world, but I'm sure they're quite comparable. This is not something we can solve necessarily with urban planning, but we can definitely, when we look at curating ground floors, making room for new shops, we can actually work with these things. We have an example we work with in Copenhagen where we were part of finding a tenant for a food and beverage unit, where he ended up having on top of the restaurant, he would do mozzarella and sausages in relation to a farm that was just at the end of Copenhagen. At the end of the day, the food from the kitchen was taken back out to the farm and even composted or in whenever possible fed back to the animals. We need to, not that will revolutionize how we eat in Copenhagen, but we need to plant the idea that we can actually take different choices in our consumption. And of course, we need green cities. We need air quality. Paris, I saw someone checking in from there, had the luxury of being there this summer, has done amazing work of removing cars from the inner city and greening up in the new spaces and heavily improving the air quality in the cities. Last but not least, and maybe this is even the toughest one, is we need to think about how we live. Of course, we all deserve to have a decent place to live. But probably we have to look into living on a little bit less space and share a little bit more. And the reason I say that is that right now, consumption of square meters is going up all around the world. So in top, there's Shrink That Footprint that did a study. I see different numbers going around. What's interesting is the numbers up there is from 2009. It states that the average Chinese person has 20 square meters per day. Today, the average Chinese person has 49 square meters per day. Below, you see a statistic that just shows that everything Denmark has done since 1990 in terms of building more sustainable has actually been zeroed out by the fact that we consume more square meters. So of course it's good that we did everything we can to build more sustainable, but because we're also over consuming square meters, the effect at the end of the day climate-wise is not doing enough. And here cities has a role to play. Copenhagen is the only city in Denmark where people have actually accepted living on fewer square meters. Of course, this is also a price issue. It's a challenge in terms of affordability. On the other hand, it's a tribute to Copenhagen. All the wonderful images I showed is why people also accept to live on their square meters. Of course, it's a price issue, but of course, it's also saying, I want to be part of this. I want to be part of a dense community. I want to be part of all these qualities and shared facilities and amenities that are out there. And therefore, I don't need as much private space. Concito did a study at one point where they said an urban family of 4 in Denmark actually have in average 1/3 less CO2 footprint than the average Dane. Again, simply living in cities where we share walls, we share infrastructure, we share public mobility is part of the answer. We need strategies to guide us along the way, and I won't go too much into that, but I would just show you a few examples. This is Skovbakke. I mentioned it very briefly. Here we worked with actually curating the tenants, bringing them in and bringing them to the city, and created new focus on sustainability, local heroes really driving a neighborhood and creating a place where people belong. This space was curated, and by curated I mean both the public space and the ground floors that people moved into it were curated, and it's still a place of belonging. This was originated in 2014, and the people that went in there and started their business there are still in place, including the guy that had the restaurant with the mozzarella on top and the connection to the farm outside. In Carlsberg, in Copenhagen, Carlsberg is a beer. It's also a brewery site, and it's a great example of brownfield transformation. We should really consider stopping building on greenfield and rather build on brownfield. We need to look at how we can use the spaces that are already there, where we can give something back to the city and at the same time borrow a little bit from it. When Carlsberg was planned, the competition brief wrote, how do you want to live? How can public spaces and ground floors support that? And how do you deal with sustainability, both the social, the economical, and the environmental? The answer was a master plan that was built out, but along with that was an urban life strategy and retail strategy built that worked both with the cultural, the recreational, and the commercial spaces in the site. Together with this, BRIQ at the time did a noni map. Basically went in and did a test fit to really figure out how this neighborhood could work, but also to figure out how can we find people that want to be part of that urban life. And today, Carlsberg is a fully built out neighborhood. It's a well-integrated neighborhood in Copenhagen. More than 60,000 square meters. Sorry for those of you that are in feet, but a large percentage of this is the ground floor, and it's actually active. When you walk around in Copenhagen or in Carlsberg, you feel invited to walk. Part of what was done there early on was also to find these kind of local heroes to start. So the markets photo on the right-hand side was actually a grill bar that opened very early. They had local food sent in from farmers around Copenhagen. And part of the rent was actually to have a farmer's market twice a week to start the community building on site. There's a number of different restaurants and things in play, but at the end of the day, you have today a place and a neighborhood that's very walkable. It has streets that look like the rest of Copenhagen. I mention this because this is actually a private development. Of course, it's done in collaboration with the city of Copenhagen, but it's a private developer that developed it. The streets are owned by the people that now live in the housing together with the facility manager, but everything there the street looks like the rest of Copenhagen. It looks like a place where you are invited to go in. It doesn't look like a segregated neighborhood. It just fits into Copenhagen seamlessly. You see just a few of the spaces here and the quality in place. I just wanted to tell one last story about Copenhagen. Or Carlsberg. When Carlsberg was planned, they had hoped to get a metro line. We're building a new ring metro in Copenhagen. They didn't get it. There was political issues. Didn't matter. There was a rundown train station 200 meters away. Instead, Carlsberg went and had a dialogue with a public transport provider saying, you must have set up a site to renovate this. This was a very rundown stop. And they said, why don't we co-finance and move the stop? So they moved the stop 200 meters. And today, when you arrive at Carlsberg, you have Carlsberg Station, which is a space designed for pedestrians and bicycles. Cars are only allowed in as a kiss and ride, and you can walk seamlessly into the community. We can actually invite for sustainable behavior in how we design our cities. Aarhusgade, another new neighborhood in Copenhagen. It's a waterfront destination. You have 130,000 swimmers there per day. Fantastic environment. You have Yaya architects that have done this wonderful parking structure, which has playgrounds on the roof and an opportunity to create communities. There's a lot of good things that are happening there in terms of play and community building. Here, there was also done a public or urban life strategy of activating really the ground floor, not just the public spaces, but really the ground floor and the entire area as part of this, really finding out how it could work, making a manifest of the kind of values that people that wanted to go in as a renter would want to have here, and also having a developer that believed in these sustainable choices, but also believed in curating a ground floor so you would get long-term tenants that could help build a community. Today, the community is very much placed in place in North Harbor. This is just a small darling of mine. It's my great colleagues at the office that does architecture. Did this transformation of the Red City. So basically, it's a mix of a transformation of old buildings, harbor building, and new infill buildings that actually are 7 small buildings altogether. It's done by my great colleagues. I'm very impressed the fact that it looks like it could be done by 7 different offices. But more importantly, it creates a space. And it's interesting because Aarhusgade is a waterfront development, and a lot of the public space focus is on the waterfront. But here is actually a space in the middle that is truly public at heart. You see how the benches in the middle of the public space really just encourage anyone to come and sit. But it also has that commercial edge that allows you to have small units and small shop. A little fun twist is the rhythm of the historical buildings actually allowed us to introduce these tiny units. So now at the ground floor here, you have 18 square meter units, commercial units, something that you would hardly ever find in a new high-end residential development, which Aarhusgade Kvarter North Harbor is also. But that means, of course, that the independent flower shop, the small vineyard guide, and the coffee roastery can actually move into this area and start to a business from scratch because it's tiny units. And at the end of the day, it's about people and giving them opportunities. We work essentially also on sustainability on this one. So the whole area is insulated with hempcrete, so biogenic materials. I could talk much more about this. We have a research project right now with Dreyer's Foundation, where we're looking into biogene materials, not just growing to build, but actually looking at leftover crops that is already grown. So stuff that would normally burn from the agriculture, we're reusing and as plant-based materials in the buildings. So what I hope came across is that I do think we can invite for sustainable behavior. I think we, of course, need to build super sustainable. We should, in general, consider everything we build. It's often said that the most sustainable building is the one that's already built. I think it also means that the least sustainable is the one built but not in use. So we really should activate use and reuse, transform and reuse. It also goes to this that we should maybe consider not building on greenfield whenever possible and rather do urban infield and brownfield transformation, because it allows us to give something back to the city, but also borrow something from the city, and at the end of the day encourage the city to become something more. It is incredibly important that we understand as architects, as urban designers, planners, that we have the hugest of all responsibility. We curate the reality of everyone else. And that also means it's our responsibility to do that invitation, to invite us to maybe live on a little bit less, share a little bit more, take our transportation footprint down, give us encouragement to walk and bike, not just by infrastructure, but also by filling up the ground floor. So it's interesting and inviting to go along. And last but not least, let's try to invite for different consumption. Let's offer new opportunities in the city to create awareness of what we have to do to actually reach sustainable goals. I think that was more or less what I wanted to say, Jill, and then I think I'm open for questions, and I hope I was within time, more or less. I'll just show you this last little video film from the project, which is actually just a drone film from site, and I think it to some extent shows how we can and should change our cities so they do invite for sustainable behavior and urban life. I will stop sharing, and thank you so much.
Oh, Kristian, wonderful. What is your call to action? This is the last question. Send us out on a call to action. This is not an academic exercise. I invite people because I want everybody to be active. This is on how to create this urban life and sustainable behavior. So what would be your call to action? And I remind people that within 2 days, you will have the recording at gpenalosa.ca. Go to gpenalosa.ca on Thursday, and you will have the recording, and please share it with many. So Kristian, your call to action, and this has been fascinating. I'm so grateful for this amazing presentation that you provided. Lots of not only interesting, but useful information.
Well, thank you so much again for the invitation. My call to action would be think more holistically of how we plan city and think about, does this actually create an invitation to make more sustainable choices in your everyday? I think it is that simple, because I think whether we're evaluating a new building, looking at a streetscape, looking at a park, looking at new developments, if we ask ourselves, do we at the end of the day think this will encourage people to live more sustainable? Then we have the right question. So the call from Answer to be bring that question with you guys, and go out and help create this invitation.
Kristian, thank you very much. Amazing presentation. Every one of your examples, you showed us very clearly the link of urban life and sustainability, our sustainable behavior, how we move, how we buy, where we live, but also urban life and health, mental, physical, social. And I mean, I love how you gave examples about the daily life, how schools, for example, you said schools are public buildings, public schools. So after 4 p.m., Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays, they should be open to the community so that we can live more sustainable using the existing infrastructure in multiple ways. I hope that everybody who watches this video, please not only enjoy it, but share it. Share it with decision makers, elected officials, city staff, with advocates, with students, with the media, with everyone. And I'll see you in 2 weeks in the next session of Cities for Everyone, the webinar.